Hey everyone, I'm your host, Abby, and today we've got some absolutely mind-blowing numbers to talk about from BYD's first quarter results. These figures are just wow.
Oh my goodness, Abby, I am so excited to dive into this topic today. BYD has just, absolutely crushed it this quarter with nearly 1 million vehicles sold in just 3 months. That's not just a little milestone, that's a massive statement in the EV world.
I know, right? Almost a million vehicles. And we're talking about a 60% increase year over year, that's just incredible. I'm really curious about how they're managing this kind of growth when other manufacturers are struggling.
Well, and the thing that really stands out to me is not just the overall sales numbers, but the export growth. I mean, BYD is clearly, making huge moves internationally. They're not just dominating in China anymore. They're becoming a true global player.
So let's break down these impressive figures and see what they mean for the EV market leadership battle that's happening right now. Tesla better be watching carefully. So, Alec, let's dive into these BYD numbers because they are just, staggering, to say the least. We're looking at, nearly 1 million vehicles sold in Q1 2025?
Yeah, so the exact figure is 996,712 vehicles in the first quarter, which is literally just a whisker away from hitting that million mark. And that represents about a 60% jump year over year, which is just mind-blowing when you think about it. I mean, most companies would be thrilled with, 10 or 15% growth.
That's incredible, and I'm curious about the breakdown between their different vehicle types. Can you tell us more about what kinds of EVs are making up these numbers?
Oh, for sure. So what's really interesting here is the mix between battery electric vehicles, the BEVs, and plug-in hybrids. BYD sold around 416,388 pure battery electric vehicles in Q1, which is up about 39% from the same period last year when they sold just over 300,000 units.
So that's strong growth for their BEVs, but not quite as dramatic as their overall numbers. What's driving the difference?
That's exactly right, Abby. The real growth engine has been their plug-in hybrids, PHEV sales hit 569,710 units in Q1, which represents a massive 76% increase from last year's 324,184. So they're really seeing consumers gravitate toward that hybrid technology.
What's interesting is how that shifts the proportions in their product mix compared to last year, right?
Absolutely. And this is a key point. In Q1 last year, BEVs made up about 48.1% of their sales, but now they're down to 42.2%. Meanwhile, PHEVs have grown from 51.9% to 57.8% of their total sales. So we're seeing this clear consumer preference for plug-in hybrids emerging, at least in BYD's case.
That's fascinating. Do you think this says something about consumer preferences or more about BYD's strategic focus?
I think it's probably a bit of both, On one hand, PHEVs solve the range anxiety problem that still makes some people hesitant about pure EVs. But also, BYD has been really clever with their pricing and feature packaging on the PHEV models. They've made them like incredibly attractive value propositions in the markets they serve.
Now, let's talk about something that really caught my eye in these numbers, Alec. The export growth. I mean, BYD's overseas sales are up, 111% in Q1?
Yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely bonkers when you really think about it. They exported 206,084 vehicles in the first quarter, which is, more than double what they did in Q1 last year. And this is a new all-time record high for them. It's like they're not just growing anymore, they're absolutely exploding onto the global scene.
That's massive. What markets are they targeting with these exports? Are we seeing them mainly in developing regions, or are they making inroads into established markets too?
So they're doing both, right? They started with developing markets where price sensitivity is higher and they could really leverage their cost advantages. I'm talking about places like, Southeast Asia, parts of Latin America, the Middle East. But what's really interesting is how they're now pushing hard into Europe as well.
And how are they being received in those more established markets with entrenched competitors?
It's been a real mixed bag, to be honest. In some European countries, they're seeing really strong demand because, well, they offer this compelling combination of features and price that's just hard to beat. But they're also facing some headwinds with the EU's investigation into Chinese EV subsidies and potential tariffs, That could definitely complicate things for BYD's expansion plans.
What does this international growth mean for BYD's position in the global EV market?
Oh, it's transformative, Abby. Look, a few years ago, BYD was essentially a Chinese company selling to Chinese consumers. Now they're becoming a true global player with significant volume outside their home market. This international diversification is hugely important because it reduces their dependence on any single market and gives them economies of scale that can make them even more competitive on price.
So, do you think this export growth indicates BYD is on track to potentially overtake Tesla as the global EV leader?
I think it's complicated. In pure volume terms, BYD is already selling more electrified vehicles if you count both BEVs and PHEVs, but Tesla still leads in pure battery electric vehicle sales globally. What's clear, though, is that BYD is growing much, much faster, especially in international markets, and they've got this momentum that's just incredible to watch. If these export trends continue, the gap is going to narrow very quickly.
Let's zoom in on March specifically, Alec. BYD sold what? 420 vehicles just in that 1 month? That seems incredible for a company that many Americans hadn't even heard of a few years ago.
Yeah, so March was actually really impressive for them. They sold 420 vehicles globally, and in the vast majority of those, about 371,419 were passenger cars. That's up 15% from February and up 23.1% from the same month last year. It's just continuing this pattern of really strong growth.
How does that compare to what they're actually producing? Are they keeping up with demand?
That's a great question because their production numbers actually outpaced their sales. They produced 395,091 vehicles in March, which is up 33% from last year. So there's this gap of about 17,671 vehicles between what they made and what they sold. And that could mean a few things, right? It could be inventory building for future months, or they might be stockpiling for new market launches,
Do you think that production sales gap is something to be concerned about, or is it just normal business operations?
I think for now, it's probably just normal operations. A lot of companies actually maintain some buffer between production and sales to handle logistics and distribution needs. But if that gap started growing month after month, then yeah, that might indicate some softening demand or maybe some issues with their supply chain. But right now, the numbers don't suggest any serious misalignment between supply and demand.
Their export numbers for March were particularly striking to me. Didn't they hit an all-time monthly high?
Absolutely. March was a record-breaking month for their exports. They shipped 72,723 units overseas, which is nearly 90% higher than the same month last year and up 8.5% from February. This is the highest monthly export figure in BYD's history, which really underscores how seriously they're taking international markets now. It's not just about dominating China anymore. They want to be a global player, you know what I mean?
What does this tell us about their manufacturing capacity? Are they reaching their limits, or do they still have room to grow?
So, from everything we're seeing, they still have plenty of headroom. BYD has been investing heavily in new production facilities both in China and internationally. They're building plants in Thailand, Brazil, Turkey, and they've got plans for more. So when we look at these March numbers, I think it's clear that they've got the manufacturing muscle to support their ambitions, but they're not even close to maxing out their capacity yet. AI. When we see this kind of manufacturing strength combined with growing demand, especially in export markets, it suggests BYD is positioning itself for continued expansion throughout 2025 and beyond.
So, Alec, I'm really curious about how the different BYD brands are performing within their portfolio. They're not just one monolithic company anymore, right?
No, they're definitely not just one single brand anymore. They've actually got this this whole ecosystem of different brands now, each kind of, targeting different segments of the market. And the performance across these brands in March was pretty interesting to look at.
Can you break down some of those numbers for us?
Yeah, so if we look at their luxury brand Yangwang, they sold just 133 units in March. But then you've got Fang, which is their premium SUV brand, and they sold 8,051 units, that's actually up 126% year over year. That's huge growth. And then Denza, which is their joint venture with Mercedes-Benz, they sold 12,620 units, up about 22.8% from last year.
Those growth percentages are impressive, especially for Fang Chongbao. What about their core BYD branded vehicles?
Oh, the core BYD vehicles are still the absolute backbone of their business, right? The Dynasty and Ocean series combined sold 350,615 units in March, which is up 23% year over year. So that's still where the bulk of their volume comes from, These are the models that most people associate with BYD, affordable, practical EVs and PHEVs with really good range and features.
Do you think their multi-brand strategy is working for them?
I think it's working incredibly well, actually. It's similar to what Volkswagen Group does or what Toyota does with Lexus, right? You've got different brands at different price points. So Yangwang is going after that ultra-luxury segment, competing with, like, Bentley and Rolls-Royce. Then Fang Chongbao is more like their Land Rover competitor, and Denza is positioned as this sophisticated premium brand.
Which of these brands do you think has the most potential for growth in international markets?
That's a great question. I think the core BYD badged vehicles will continue to lead their export push in the short term because of the price competitiveness. But Denza could be really interesting for European markets where consumers are willing to pay more for premium features, and that Mercedes connection gives it some credibility. Fang Chongbao's growth rate is really impressive, though, so that could be their dark horse internationally if they position it right. You know what I mean?
Those numbers are fascinating, Alec. And it makes me wonder about their overall growth trajectory. They've been scaling up at a pretty remarkable pace, haven't they?
Oh, absolutely. It's actually mind-blowing when you look at the numbers. So BYD sold about 3 million vehicles in 2023, right? And then they jumped to 4.3 million in 2024. And now they're projected to deliver something like, 5.5 million units this year in 2025, and then pushing up to around 6.5 million in 2026. That's unprecedented scaling in the automotive world.
When you put it that way, it really is staggering growth. What do you think this means for the broader EV market?
Well, it's completely reshaping the entire landscape, right? I mean, BYD is basically doubling their volume every couple of years, and that kind of scale gives them enormous advantages in terms of, supply chain leverage, battery costs, and just manufacturing efficiencies. They're driving down the cost curve faster than almost anyone else, which is making EVs more accessible to more people worldwide.
Does this put them on track to overtake Tesla in the pure EV space? I know Tesla's still ahead in terms of just battery electric vehicles.
That's the big question everyone's asking in the BYD versus Tesla debate, right? So if we look at pure BEVs, Tesla is still ahead, selling about 1.8 million units in 2024. But BYD's BEV sales are growing really fast too, even though they're currently selling more PHEVs than pure EVs. But the gap is narrowing for sure.
What's your prediction on when BYD might overtake Tesla in BEV sales specifically?
If we look at the current trajectories, I'd say probably sometime in late 2025 or early 2026, because BYD sold about 416,000 BEVs in Q1 this year alone, which is up 39% year over year. If they keep that pace up and continue expanding internationally while Tesla's growth has been, slowing down a bit lately, the crossover point is coming pretty soon.
Are there any challenges you see that might slow BYD's growth?
Well, there are definitely some headwinds they're facing. The tariffs in Europe, and the US are a major obstacle. They're facing 100% tariffs in the US now, which basically locks them out of that market and up to 35% in Europe. And there's also the question of brand perception in Western markets where they're still building awareness and trust. Plus, the competition is really heating up, with everyone from Volkswagen to Hyundai accelerating their EV plans.
How do you think Tesla is responding to BYD's rapid rise?
Tesla seems to be taking BYD very seriously now. They're pushing hard on cost reductions. They're accelerating their next-gen platform development, and they're trying to leverage their software advantages and supercharger network as differentiators. But, I think the scale that BYD is achieving might force Tesla to make some pretty dramatic moves in the next couple years to maintain their leadership position in the EV space.
I've been thinking about BYD's overall strategy, and one thing that really stands out to me is their decision back in 2022 to completely stop making traditional gas-only vehicles. How significant do you think that move was?
Oh, that was absolutely pivotal for them, right? In April 2022, BYD made this really bold decision to just completely cease all production of ICE-only vehicles like traditional gasoline cars. And instead, they decided to focus exclusively on, battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrids. It was a massive statement of intent that showed they were all in on the electric future.
What made them take such a definitive stance when other automakers were still hedging their bets?
I think it comes down to their unique position as both a battery company and a car company. BYD actually started as a battery manufacturer, right? And they've been developing that expertise for decades. So they had this deep understanding of battery technology and supply chains that most traditional automakers just didn't have.
So their battery background gave them the confidence to make that leap?
Exactly. They knew they could control the most expensive and critical component of an EV, which is the battery. And by going all in on electrification, they could focus all their R&D, all their manufacturing capacity, and all their supply chain optimization efforts on just EVs and PHEVs. No distractions, no hedging, just complete commitment to the electric future.
How has that decision played out for them in terms of their growth trajectory?
It's been absolutely transformative, right? Since making that decision, their growth has just exploded. I mean, look at these numbers we've been discussing today. Nearly 1 million vehicles in just one quarter, up 60% year over year. The decision to abandon ICE vehicles allowed them to accelerate faster than companies still trying to manage both traditional and electric product lines.
Do you think other automakers regret not making a similar move earlier?
I'm sure some of them are kicking themselves now, because while many traditional automakers were taking this gradual approach to electrification, BYD was going all in and building massive scale. And now they've got this huge head start in terms of volume, cost efficiency, and just overall electric vehicle expertise that's going to be really hard for others to catch up to.
So to wrap things up, BYD's Q1 performance has been, well, nothing short of remarkable, hasn't it? Nearly 1 million vehicles sold in just 3 months, with a 60% increase year over year. That's incredible momentum.
It really is, Abby. And what stands out to me most is how they're not just dominating in China anymore, right? I mean, those export numbers are just mind-blowing. Over 200,000 vehicles exported in Q1, up 111% from last year. They're becoming this true global player in the EV space that's challenging Tesla's leadership position in real time.
Do you think we're witnessing a real shift in the EV market leadership here?
I think we absolutely are. Look at the trajectory. From 3 million vehicles in 2023 to potentially 5.5 million this year. BYD is scaling at a pace that even Tesla has to be watching very closely. And the fact that they're so vertically integrated with their battery production gives them this unique advantage that's hard to replicate.
Before we go, I just want to thank all our listeners for tuning into another episode of BYD versus Tesla, analyzing the shift in EV market leadership. If you enjoyed today's discussion, please take a second to hit that like button.
Yes, and don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, hit that notification bell to stay updated whenever we release new content. We'd really love to hear your thoughts on BYD's growth, so please leave a comment below.
We'll be back next week with more insights on the evolving EV market. Until then, drive electric and stay curious.